I want to share something. I mean, Stu, when you want people to hear something, when do you announce it? Do you want the press to carry the load and everything else? When do you announce it? Monday.
Maybe
okay.
Monday morning, get the week started. Like you could change the news cycle, maybe shape the week of coverage.
Okay. If you don't want anybody knowing about it, when do you release the information?
Friday evening.
Yeah.
You know, Friday afternoon when people are kind of going on work, off of work for the weekend. They're not going to be focusing on news as much.
Well, that's weird because Joe Biden released some information and had a press conference on fundamentally transforming our economy on Friday afternoon, which is weird. I know everybody might have been, thinking about the weekend, and so they didn't pay any attention. But I'm sure that's just an oversight in this administration. So, it's not like they can say, look, we told everybody what was coming. We told them. They didn't pay attention. Well, we did. Because the climate finance report came out on Friday. Now, this is something that is slipping through most people's radar. My new book, The Great Reset, you can order it now on Amazon. It is coming out in January. It is a must-read, and it ties all of this together. People are not paying attention to what's really going on because they don't understand it, or they have bought into it can't happen here, or, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would these companies do this? Well, they are preparing you for the things that are coming. This little climate finance report is a roadmap to build a climate-resilient economy. Oh, that sounds good. Now, this is something we told you back in March was coming. The banks were beginning to implement environmental, social, and governance scores completely on their own. It's something that actually began at the Paris Agreement, the Paris Accords. You remember? We found a little clause in the Paris Agreement because why was everyone so upset? How dare we pull out of the Paris Climate Accords? Well, because there's a little clause in there. While everybody was paying attention to the climate part of the Accords, we thought it was interesting that the world's biggest banks were meeting at the same time. And in the climate agreement from Paris, Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement mandates countries' parties to make financial flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate-resilient development. Now, we thought that was interesting. What does it mean that they have to make financial flows consistent with a pathway? Well, I think this is why the Trump administration pulled us out of the Paris Accords. You just don't screw with people's money. But that's exactly what the global elites began plotting in 2015, to follow your money and choke it off at the source. So this side meeting was conducted in Paris between the world's leading financial institutions. Two organizations took the lead, setting the framework to fundamentally alter global finance. This is the Great Reset finance part. It was the World Bank and the UN. And they outlined what is now called the United Nations Environmental Program, which just pisses me off because it has two M's and an E at the end. That's not the way you spell program. But anyway, the United Nations Environment Program Finance Initiative. They brought together 230 banks and insurance companies to draft a methodology that would bend the private sector to the will of the government by using banks as a pressure or a choke point. Remember when I said it's going to get harder and harder for you to get loans? This is what I'm talking about. The Amalgamated Bank was one of the first U.S. institutions that was originally signing on to this. Now, I had never heard of the Amalgamated Bank before, but that's the largest owned union bank in the United States of America. They're owned by the Workers United, which is SEIU. Isn't that great? They led the charge in bringing the entire framework to the United States. Now, banks all over the country are all following suit. The only thing that was missing was full U.S. government support. Well, that became a reality on Friday. This is now what I have warned about for so many years. I told you that your bank and your livelihood would be used as leverage to bend you to their will. This is why I've been saying you have to speak out right now because it's not going to get easier. What was revealed on Friday is the framework for implementing the Great Reset directly on Main Street, USA. And I've got the details of the report. Now, I want you to listen. Remember, the Great Reset says you're not going to own anything by 2030. That's their goal. That no one has a private possession by 2030. You will rent everything. Well, let me ask you something. If you don't have any land, if you don't have property yourself, if you don't own anything, you don't own a business, where do you go when you don't like what's happening? How do you protest? How do you build a meat packing plant when the 4 meat packing plants are all colluding against you if you can't own anything? Answer, nowhere. You're a serf. So here are the details that were announced on Friday. Financial regulation, quote, the failure of financial institutions to appropriately and adequately account for and measure physical and transition risks threatens the competitiveness of U.S. companies and markets and the ability of U.S. financial institutions to serve communities. So they're saying the banks haven't done enough on global warming, and that will hurt our competitiveness in the United States against other countries like China. So they want the financial institutions to put the screws to anybody who is not complying with their version of whatever has to be done for climate change. And that somehow or another is going to make us more competitive. It's a warning shot directly to the banks and companies. The government wants compliance, and they're gearing up to apply pressure to those who don't. The report, and I kid you not, the report mentions a law in France called France's Energy Transition Law. Now, what that law is, it uses something called, quote, comply or explain. I kid you not. Comply or explain. And it outlines how every bank and every company needs to provide a full accounting and a full report to the government disclosing all of their ESG measures. If you don't, you will feel pain. This is what the White House on Friday said is coming here. Comply or explain. As per this report, the White House has directed Secretary of Treasury to begin this initiative under the Financial Stability Oversight Council. So you see what they're doing? They're saying climate change is a national security threat. And there'll be no stopping this because you will have to comply or explain. If you think I'm crazy, I want you just to Google Coca-Cola's latest report from Coca-Cola of Europe, and you look at the 98 pages of compliance of what they have to do to, quote, justify their business license. That's in the report. That's what's coming here. Next, protect American lives, savings, and pensions. This might be the most evil of all of them. It is the ultimate blackmail on Americans. Comply, explain, or lose your insurance. Lose your life savings. I urge you to see what our White House released on Friday. Next, federal procurement. Do you work for a company that has any kind of federal contracts? Any? If so, Southwest, your business will probably be the first one targeted. If it doesn't adhere to ESG, get ready to lose the contract. Addressing climate risk in the VA lending programs. If the VA lending, if those banks don't adhere to ESG, then the vets don't get any houses. How do you like that? The report goes on mentioning things like interagency efforts to build resilience. But what this is really bringing is the Great Reset to your doorstep and giving it the teeth to impose its will. This was an extraordinarily important speech, and this is something that if they really believed it and thought they could get it through with the American people, it would have been done in an Oval Office setting at 8 o'clock at night. And it would have been promoted as the most important speech in all of our lifetimes, because it was. He was saying, because of climate change, we're completely changing the way corporations run and the way the government can or cannot interfere with the free market and the way your banking is done. And it's comply or feel the pain. That is not America. That's Venezuela. That's not America. And if they were honest about it, they would have told you tonight, tomorrow, Wednesday, at 8 p.m. from the Oval Office. But they know you won't go for it. And they also know they've done such a good job that unless you're prepared, and I urge you, get this, not from me, get this from whitehouse.gov, get this from the Financial Times, get this from anybody, and have it there for your friends, because they know that they can deem this a conspiracy theory. But it's all there in black and white. And believe me, if we don't stand together in 8 years, we all indeed will own nothing.